Welcome back to V8 Creative and part 57 of the Ultima RS build, and on this episode we start the beast for the first time. Yes, welcome back to the Dean Den, and I've got an all-day pass. And today we are going to start the engine for the very first time. This is the episode so many of you have been waiting for, to hear the roar of that 6.2 litre V8 for the very first time. I'm nervous, I'll be honest with you, but I'm sure it will be fine, he says. Anyway, before we can crank her over for the first time, there are a number of smaller jobs I need to do. So for those of you out there who love the spannering, continue watching. But if you just want to jump to that first start, I'll put the timestamp up there. Anyway, let's just get our spanners and start spannering. Next, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be adjusting the gear linkage. Now, when I installed this, I just set it up very roughly, but the first thing to do is remove the connections from the box, make sure this larger arm is vertical, and then what we're going to do is go inside the car and connect up the gear stick, and then come back here and then start doing the adjustment. Welcome to the inside of my RS. It's been a while since I've been in here, and it's quite comfortable actually, now fully carpeted of course. Now what you've seen here is I've threaded through the two cables, the gear shift cables, and I'm putting in the big nuts that hold them on to that bracket using a couple of spanners. It's a bit tight because the handbrake's in the way, but I'm just nipping those up about midway, so I've got adjustment both ways. Notice the little blue bit there, and that's always goes on the right for Ultima with their cables. Now I'm putting on the little socket on the end of the left-hand cable, and that clips on the bottom of the main gear stick, just there. Now, there you go, you can see it moving backwards and forwards, very simple mechanism. Now what I'm doing is with the other cable, popping on that little socket as well. It's a bit tight in there, but you can see me, I'm just spinning it up now. There's a little lock nut that you tighten it, and that clips on that other small arm. A lot of heavy breathing going on, sorry. Now if we go to the back, what we need to do is adjust those cables so that that ball and that socket just clip on and off with no real deflection. You can see here on that top cable, I'm adjusting it to push it further up, and you'll see now that would just clip straight onto that ball. Now I've done the same on the lower arm, and that clips into place. I'm going to jump in the car, and yeah, there you go. I'm just doing a bit of gear selection there. It needs more adjustment, but you get the idea. Next, fluids. Fluids. Not particularly exciting topic, I know, but a very important topic. Now if you imagine this RS, everything on it is brand spanking new. So not a single drop of coolant, lubricant or hydraulic fluid has seen any component ever. Therefore you have to treat them very carefully. And as such, what Ultima do is they provide a list of such fluids that they recommend to put in the car, and sure enough those align with those recommended by Chevrolet Performance, Porsche, etc. So let's have a look what I've got here. Well, over here we have Mobil 1, fully synthetic oil. Now this is clearly for that 6.2 litre V8, and it's a nice piece of tipple. I think those two between them are about 100 quid. Now actually more than that, I think they're about 120. So it's not cheap, this stuff, and that needs replacing with the filter after 30 miles of running. It's a new engine, So there may be a slight bit of wear because those tolerances are going to be really tight. And then what you can do is examine the oil and see if all is well within that V8. Then you change it all again at 500 miles. So yeah, so it costs a bit of money to bed these cars in that a lot of people don't really appreciate. Now next, if we move along to the transaxle, that needs some lovely oil as well. And this is recommended by Porsche to allow that box of cogs to just absolutely perform as they should. Next, cooling. Now as with the oil, the cooling you use, or the cooling fluid, let's call it, this comes pre-mixed and it has to be a certain type so it looks after the aluminium block. And yep, this little lot here, you need quite a lot of it actually. I think it's about 20 litres there, because this cooling system is pretty big. It's a huge rad at the front, and then either side there is the tube that comes all the way to the back. Then you have the heater matrix, and then on top of that you have that big V8 which has a lot of cooling galleries within it. Let's move on to hydraulics now. So the brakes. Now luckily the AP Racing brakes came with DOT 5.1 brake fluid, and what I've done is I've purchased a brake bleeder that's going to help me do this on my own, because I remember doing brake bleeding with my dad when it was down, up, down, up. And I can remember doing this for hours in the garage with different cars, but now I've got a nifty little tool. So let's see if that works a bit later. Now the clutch, that's hydraulic of course. You don't need a lot of this, but this is DOT 4. So this is going to go in that clutch reservoir and pump that up, because of course when I'm starting this thing, I want to make sure she's in neutral. I want to make sure that I can brake if there's an issue. There won't be, I'm sure. But anyway, I want to make sure all those hydraulic systems are really buttoned down. And then at the end of all this, we have screen wash. I know. So, let's just start with putting the oil in the engine, and we'll go round and we'll top everything up and get her ready for that first start. So here we go with all the runny stuff. Now what you see me doing here is I've taken the oil filter off and I'm basically priming it. I'm filling it. Now the reason we need to do this is to get oil pressure in the engine. We want to do that before we start firing it up. So if we get as much air out of the system as possible, we can crank it over on the starter and get oil pressure. So now on my back, putting it back on. It's a bit tight under there. There's a chassis cross member very close to the filter, but just whipping it up hand tight. So now in goes the Model 1, the tipple. I can't believe I've videoed me putting oil in an engine. But anyway, some nice background music for you. You can skip past this if you want, but there you go, that's 5 litres pretty much in there, yeah. So you can see just about there on the dipstick, it's just measuring. It needs a bit more, I think about 0.7 of a litre. I added that off camera, no need to show you that. Right, next, let's move on to the brakes. Now this is my new brake bleeding tool. Never used one of these before. It uses basically a vacuum and it pulls the fluid through. Now with these 6-pot calipers, there's a bleed nipple on each side. Now if you think that's 2 on each corner, so that's 8. So even though technically I guess you don't have to do each side of the caliper, I did anyway, and some air did come out of both sides. So you pop it on. Slide that spanner down. And this is the first time I tried this. Really, you need to build up a bit of vacuum before you undo it, but it doesn't really matter. You can see it there. And that's it. I'm not going to show you any more. You get the idea. Took me about an hour and a half. Right, gearbox. Let's look at the German engineering here. Now, this gearbox takes 3.5 litres of oil, and you actually put it through this quite small hole here. So what I did is I decided to sort of rig up a container, zip tie it to the chassis. You'll see it in a minute. Yeah, look at that. And then just fill it up with the oil and carry on doing other work around the car as it slowly trickled in. Next on the list, we have the clutch. Now the hydraulic system on the clutch is tiny, and this is the reservoir here. It is so small, and it's quite difficult to fill actually. That is about 3 pumps on the pedal will empty that, but I filled it up. I think it's .4 I'm using here. Yeah, I'm sure it is. And then I go to the back of the car. There's the bleed nipple there. Exactly the same as the brakes. That was quite easy to bleed actually. Got a nice pedal off of that clutch now. Even though it's a high performance clutch, it's not heavy at all. Yes, I'm even showing you me putting petrol in the thing. Well, I thought, why not? I'm going to show you all the fluids. Tell you what, that was a few trips to the garage to get all that fuel and fill up those tanks. Now, before we do that proper start, we've got to build oil pressure. So, to reduce the strain on the starter motor, we're removing the plugs so there's no compression. Oh, and of course, let's disconnect the brain. I just want to make sure that nothing's going to be harmed or confused. All I want to do is crank it over like a mechanical assembly. These clips are quite a challenge actually. They're never going to fall off on their own. Here we go. It's creeping up. Look at that. Oh, that's great. Round 2 is good enough. Next, let's check if we've got fuel pressure. Now 60 psi is pretty high. And there you go. Bang! And no leaks. That's exactly what we want. So, the big moment's arrived. Yep, you're watching this live. Will she start? Now, to be honest with you, it should all be plain sailing, but you never know. I've been building this car for 2 years. It doesn't usually take that long. It's because I'm doing all this filming. So, this is like the last 3% of the build, and the first start is so stressful. So I've got no leaks, I've got fuel pressure, I've got oil pressure, I've connected up all the ignition system. So really the only thing that's going to be missing is spark. Will that brain work? Well, let's just wait and see. So I'm not going to say a lot because I'm going to be pretty stressed looking at the gauges, make sure I get oil pressure straight away. But should we just do it? Should we just crank it and see? Now, this is inside my Dean Den. I should have the car outside, but it's pouring with rain. So don't do this at home, because as soon as I start it, I'm going to open the garage door and open the windows to get a flow of air through. But anyway, let's do it. You ready? Here goes with my snooker cue. Listen to that. Success on the first turn of the key. Now, that's what I call a result. Don't you sound nice? It's a bit smoky in here, so I'm going to open the door now. But I don't know if the microphone really picked that up, but I'll play it back and see. If not, I'll put my bigger microphone on. This V8, it sounds so cool. I'll open the door. I'm going to start it again. I'm just checking if the water started to circulate. I doubt if it has, because the thermostat hasn't opened. I really need to get up to temperature now, and I'm not doing that in here. I'll suffocate myself. I'll do that outside. But yep, firing on all 8. God, let's do it again, shall we? Well, I've just had a few beers off camera to celebrate. Boy, this is such a huge moment. If any of you out there have ever built or restored a car, you know how I'm feeling right now. So to sell things down, we're going to do a bit more spannering. I need it. I don't know if you do. But anyway, what we're going to be looking at now is this mess on top of the engine. Now, the astute of you out there, when I was starting the engine and get it going, you probably saw that on top of the engine, there is just spaghetti. There's wires, there is basically a vacuum tube, there is also, what else is there? A really, really ugly fuel rail. Well, we're going to do something about that now. So the fuel rail, I kept the standard Chevy item on just to get the engine running. So now what we're going to do is remove that and put on the billet fuel rails that I bought from Summit Racing. Then once I've done that, what we're going to do is tidy all that wiring up, and then next I'll do something with that vacuum tube. Not quite sure yet, but I will. And then at the end of all this, what I'm going to do is actually cover the top of this engine with something very, very special. But that's for a future episode. All I want to do now is get all this tidy. So let's start with the fuel rails. As you can see, this is all the spaghetti I'm talking about here, all this wiring. Now, I don't want to cut this shorter. What I want to do is leave it stock. And the reason is, in the future, if myself or anyone else wants to service the engine, it's really easy because this is standard Chevy. Now, what I need to do is just pull these wires out the way, unplug all the injectors, and then take off this fuel rail and take it over to the bench. So then what we can do is actually install the injectors in those billet fuel rails. So let's get to it. I've removed all the clips. It's a bit of a messy job this, because the fuel rail was full of fuel, but anyway, so I've removed the clips. The injectors just pull out. In short, you keep them on a clean surface. I'm going to stink of petrol now for the rest of the day. There we go. Right, let's get rid of this. Oh God, look at that lot. Right, I'm putting this over here so it just evaporates. Any of you like the smell of petrol, you'll like this job. There's no doubting the side is clean now to do this job. Okay, right. So here are the injectors. Fuel injectors removed from the old fuel rail. Now, what I've done is I've paired these, so this is how these billet fuel rails will be going on the V8. The kit comes with 4 of these little brackets, which are bolted through the fuel rails using these bolts, and then the 4 holes go down on the intake plenum. Next, at the rear of the engine, which is here, what we do is we put on these 2 -AN adapters with O-rings, and they're connected by this braided -6AN hose that's supplied in the kit. Then on the other end, which is the cockpit end, this fuel rail has one of these -6ANs, and that connects to the current fuel system on the Ultima, and then this is a plug which goes on the other side. So let me just build these up, put the injectors in, we'll go over to the engine, and then we'll fit them.
Leaving this place, the sun's about to break. You're riding shotgun. The feeling we chase, I'm wide awake. Take me away now.
I put some Loctite on these because I don't want them coming undone, of course. And I'm laying the fuel rail onto this flat surface to make sure these are perfectly parallel. Let's do the other side.
This feeling now, God's making me crazy, making me crazy. So I'm just gonna drive. I'm just gonna drive. I'm just gonna drive. Friends, these are the good times. And I'm feeling like I could go on forever. And I've been running out of air, so let me catch my breath. I'm having a good time, don't you blame me. Yeah, this feeling I got's making me crazy, making me crazy. So I'm just gonna drive, drive, drive. I'm just gonna drive, drive, drive. I'm just gonna drive, drive. I'm just gonna drive, drive, drive.
Right, get my spanners out again. I'm just nipping these adapters up now. The fuel rails are on the engine because they're a bit more secure. Not too tight because they're rubber O-rings. They just need to be obviously fuel tight. On goes the little link tube. Being careful with those anodized hose ends because you don't want to strip that colouring off them. Now with that all in place, the next focus will be wiring. Now, I am not a zip tie fan. However, these are ideal for this sort of challenge I've got here. What I'm trying to do is that there's like multiple little looms there and I need to connect them all. I'm now looking up the right hand bank and I'm just about to add the coil pack mini loom, pop that connector down in there, and now adding the zip ties as I did on the other side. Now my focus is on the fuel hose that supplies the fuel rail. Now this comes from Ultima and the length is designed for the standard Chevrolet Performance fuel rail, which has a side exit, or entry rather. Now for this, obviously connectors on the end, so I need to measure how long it needs to be, leaving a little bit of slack in there because you want to allow for that engine to move and not strain those connectors. Now I'm not going to show you me making this because ta-da, it's done. You can go on YouTube and find out how to do this. There is a very specific way of doing this in a reliable fashion. So if you're going to be doing this, changing hose lengths, definitely do a little bit of research. Here we are now, we're just nipping up those connectors and we're almost ready for that first start again. Well, it's not really the first start, it's the second start or the third. But anyway, just need to make sure there are no fuel leaks. Back to the Dean Den. Okay. Right, let's see if it leaks. Oh, good. Yes, and another episode draws to a close, and what an episode it's been. You've heard that heartbeat of my V8. Not many episodes to go now until she's on the road. I calculate another 3 episodes before I go for the big test to get a UK road legal, and then we're gonna rip up some tarmac. So until next time, as I always say, keep smiling and keep spannering.